Okay, so how does it take 3 days to gain 10 pounds and 3.5 months to lose 7?
Because it doesn't take any discipline to gain and all the discipline in the world to lose. My wife started making me run a month ago, and I'm looking at my Fitbit trying to keep her pace on the first one. My thing is going heart rate 180, peak, 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 peak. It's like, stop. I felt like I was going to die.
Yeah.
And what was her pace?
Not very fast. 12-minute mile? No. 11-minute mile.
Wait, hold on. For anyone paying attention at home, a 12-minute mile is...
It's kind of a stroll.
It's kind of a brisk walk, but it's not a sprint. And you got your heart rate at 180 at a 12-minute mile pace.
Is it any better that I was wearing a black comfort color shirt?
No. You could have been wearing a snowmobile suit.
I would have surely expired.
And you also realize like
Except that
how
it's
many
Friday.
how many personality traits Blake and Spencer have in common.
Okay.
It was eerie.
Ashamedly.
Yeah.
Enneagram, exact same. Our wives, exact same.
And some
Wait.
Our wives' Enneagrams.
I gotcha.
Oh, no, we don't have the same wife. No, you heathens. Our Enneagrams.
you guys also had a lot in common with some very maniacal world history figures.
Harrison Ford's on that list, and we're going to cling to him like he's on Air Force One. Holding on.
Is it Myers-Briggs? Is that the test?
Yeah.
And they have these are the celebrities that you're alike.
Yeah.
And I pulled it out, and it was like Harrison Ford, Donald Trump, Adolf Hitler.
Whoops.
It's like, interesting. I don't know how I feel about this.
What do
I
we
don't know
think?
how Harrison Ford feels.
What
about
do
it.
we not know about Harrison Ford?
That's exactly the question that was going through my mind.
Did Jesus have an Enneagram number just like the rest of us? And if so, what would that have been?
9.
A 2?
Oh my goodness. I don't know how I feel about this.
Maybe he's a little bit of every.
Especially because Enneagram's apparently witchcraft, right? So
I did see that sweep across Facebook a couple months ago.
I didn't see that.
So it
Anyways.
must be true.
it must be.
I'm a 7, so I was out having fun when that happened.
That's right. Well, welcome to the MxU Podcast. This is what you're in for today. For those of you who don't know, we're joined by Blake Hodges and Toby Walters from ChurchGear. We've got Spencer here from our team, and we're excited to have a little chat today. Mm-hmm. Thank you guys for being here. You've been here this week filming content, and it was kind of your venture, right? We're helping with the filming, but you're recording ChurchGear content for ChurchGear, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So
Spencer was like, hey, you got a bunch of gear. You should film some videos on it. We were like, yeah, MxU films gear. How hard could it be? It was pretty hard. Apparently, you need a lot of preparation for an SD9.
Yeah, it's a little different doing a training video on an SD9 versus an Aviom A16. The feature set is a
little more expanded.
Yeah, slightly different.
We were rolling on the Avoms. I mean, we were crushing those.
So what?
Okay, this is the thing.
This is what you deal with Blake, though. He knows nothing about gear.
No, he did that intentionally because we were having a conversation yesterday of, is it Aviom or Aviom? I'm almost certain it's Aviom. What do you know, Jeff?
I've heard it both ways, but I would say
it swings both ways.
Since it is an AV-related device, Aviom might be correct.
Yeah.
I've never heard a representative from Aviom talk about Avioms, so maybe it could be, and it depends. You know,
Could be.
if it's a Latinate pronunciation, it would be Aviom.
Yeah. Can somebody in the comments please just settle this once and for all?
Yeah.
So we can move on.
Is it MxU or is it MxU?
Ugh. I actually haven't heard that one.
It's a great way to thank our
welcome.
guests for letting us use their facility
Yeah.
all week.
So you turned it into Avoms?
I looked at Toby and I said, that's controversy. Say it 17 different ways.
Avioms.
So
Avioms.
Anyways, okay, we've got a segment on the podcast where we review church services.
Yep.
They submit them into our team, and they say, hey, here's a recording, whether it's live stream or just a recording of their in-person experience, which often are the same. Sometimes they're mixed from front of house, sometimes separate from a broadcast console, all across the board. But we have a segment here that we're about to do where we're going to record, or we're going to review someone's service recording.
So the cool thing about this, we always like to give a little bit of background. So this is from North County Christ the King Church. in Washington State. And Jason Nelson is their AV guy,
Okay.
front of house engineer, production manager, whatever. But the interesting thing is they have a single LV1 console for front of house monitors and the stream. And in the room, they have a mono EAW PA, Blackmagic switcher, and cameras. So there's no tracks, and it's a real grand piano. So all those things considered, let's have a listen and a watch of what they're doing on a Sunday morning.
And if you are for me, who can be against me? For Jesus, there's nothing impossible for you. And all I see are the ashes. You see the when all I see is a cross, God, you see the empty tomb. So when I fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Every fear I lay at your feet. I sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Almighty.
Okay.
Nice.
Man,
What are your thoughts?
I have a lot of thoughts. First of all, Toby, you would
Yep.
feel right at home at that church because if you were a bass player, you could wear cargo shorts, which would be awesome.
Did he have flip flops
he
on?
also
I didn't
wouldn't
notice.
have to
might
wear shoes.
He might have had flip flops.
No,
as
he
well.
wasn't wearing
Oh,
shoes.
Barefoot. Okay,
Barefoot.
cool.
Which initially I was like, was that intentional? Is that a thing? Sometimes people don't wear shoes on stage.
Yeah, holy ground.
Holy ground. Yeah, it was interesting. Well, I'd be curious to get from my first watch and listen. I was like, this actually sounds really pretty dang good. But you can tell it's hard when a church. I think they only have 3 cameras, right? Is that what they said? Or maybe they didn't say, but it seems obvious they only have like 3 cameras and they're all static. So it's like, now go back to 2. Go back to 3. There's like not very many options per se, but it was interesting right when the female jumped the octave.
It went
to a shot was primarily a male in the shot, and it was kind of confusing because you're like, that can't be him singing, right?
Yeah.
And
Or
so
can
it or it can't.
Is it Steve
So it's
Perry?
a little bit jarring because you're just like, oh, that is a bit distracting, I should say, when you're like, who's singing right now? Because it's such a noticeable part where they're jumping the octave and it's very prominent in the mix. And I still, to this moment, don't know who was singing that part.
I think it was still the
Piano
piano
player?
player. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. I don't
I
know.
think she's leading the song. I don't
Yeah.
know, but
Well, that's what the other thing is. I was like, her, because the jump in the octave, it wasn't fully clear. But yeah, that was something I noticed.
But I would say, as far as the mix goes, it was great.
Yeah.
Like the violin
Mhm.
was clearly heard, sounded good. The guitars played distinct parts. They sounded good. The drums sounded really good. I think, they're playing really well, especially when there's no tracks involved. It's like, okay, this is a band that plays together, plays really well together. The other thing is, you guys know that I love LV1. I think this is a great example of the capabilities of LV1 as a console because you're able to get more color and more distinctiveness and more clarity out of individual pieces because of the flexibility of the sort of non-traditional channel strip that's available to you in the console. In other words, you've got specific plugins that are great on specific instruments, and I can tell that they're being utilized very well. So I think, especially mixing, front of house monitors and the stream from the same mix or from the same desk, I thought it was super well done.
Yeah.
I mean, the one note I would give on the mixing is they could really improve it if they could just afford a Mackie 2448. I just really think that would come through a little better.
2448, huh? That's a lot of buses.
48 buses. That's a lot of buses.
Am I remembering the model number wrong?
24.8.
Well, to divert from this, I'd go back to the cargo shorts. In all sincerity, I kind of liked how casual they looked. Just as a normal churchgoer, it didn't feel like a performance at all. I'd never seen that casual of outfits, so I thought that was really inviting.
Yeah, it definitely didn't feel like nothing felt put on. It was just like, this is who we are, and we're gonna go with it.
Yeah.
How many thoughts am I allowed to have?
All
of them. So I totally echo what you guys said about the audio. I thought the audio engineer is crushing it. And when you said there's no tracks, I had assumptions going into it. And then when I heard it, I was like, are we sure they're not using tracks? Because this sounds great. I, as a viewer, and this is a philosophical tangent that I won't go down, but like, I want to feel like I'm part of the room because I love being in the room. And that's by far my preference, to be in the room on Sunday morning. They're limited with 3 cameras. As far as I know, in that room, they have about 3 people that go to the church. There's no wide shots. There's no audience feel. There's no depth of field to know, like, what does it feel like to be in the room? There's just those stage shots. And again, there's no movement. So you're very limited. And then from a worship leader's perspective, because I led worship for a long time, you forget on stage how much your movement and your facial expressions, you think you're doing a lot, but then when you see it back, you're like, oh, it looks like I'm a statue up there. Like, you have to think constantly, how do I put on the praise face and the feel and the movement, because those movements are difficult to translate out to the audience.
Yeah, that's good. And I wonder, like, this brings up something that we've talked about a lot lately, like, what in their minds is the purpose of their stream? Are we seeing something that's really meant for archive purposes? Are we seeing something that's meant to be a place for people who can't be there to tune in? Are we seeing what they would consider to be an attempt at an online campus? Like, there's varying degrees of sort of vision behind what people would want their live stream to be. And so if this is meant to be as engaging as possible for outsiders, I would totally agree with you. Like, we need to figure out a way to get some movement in those cameras. We need to figure out a way to broaden the scope to be more inclusive of what's happening in the room. But if it's just for them to have a recording of what they did, those things become a little less important. So, from a video perspective, I would definitely challenge them to go, okay, how can we make the video experience more engaging?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, for sure.
but speaking of their Blackmagic cameras, we actually have a course that's dropping tomorrow, all about Blackmagic, all the ecosystem of what it takes to pull off your stuff with Blackmagic equipment. So
We finally gave in to the dark side.
yeah, but our friend Drake Kelch,
Yeah.
who is a great presenter and a super smart guy,
He's been on your podcast before, right?
Yeah, he's a good dude.
he did these courses. So he's talking about switchers, routers, cameras, converters, and a whole lot more. So we love Drake. He does a great job of explaining kind of not just this gear, but kind of a scrappy approach to things in general, all about production. So we're excited. We heard everybody's requests about Blackmagic. We got to have Blackmagic. So this is our attempt to start down that path. Obviously, there's a lot more to cover, and there's more to come, but we hope that you feel like we've listened to what you feel like you need in terms of making your Blackmagic equipment as good as it can possibly be.
Yeah. And you guys actually helped us make that happen.
Yeah.
Had to borrow some gear from you.
That's right. We stole a switcher.
No, I think it was a
Camera?
camera.
Oh,
Camera. We bought a switcher. We actually need, we need like a piece of Blackmagic gear in this facility.
yeah.
you
But
know?
I think we actually do need to consider stealing more from these guys
Yeah, 100%.
because
Just
they've
come
got,
on over and
they've
help
got a
yourself.
lot
Yes.
of gear.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we'd notice it. Our inventory system is, I could point out the spots you can pilfer from.
All
A
right.
few
Well,
missing barcodes
yeah.
here and there.
If I find them on the ground, it gives me hives.
for all you guys, for all you
Well, it is
listening out there,
humid in Nashville. You
Yes.
just get barcodes falling off.
yeah.
and-
For all you listening, you know their inventory system's weak, and you can just go pick stuff off the shelf.
Perfect. Just
Go out
stop
to
on in and grab
Franklin,
something.
go out to Franklin, Tennessee, and
I joke all the time the insurance claim would be easier than selling all of it. So maybe we should cut that.
State Farm's our best customer.
Oh my gosh.
Insurance
Now if you guys-
fraud is probably not a business.
Yeah, I was gonna say now if you guys ever have a fire in your building, they're gonna be like, yeah, sorry, denied.
We listen to the MxU podcast, and
Yeah.
we know
Episode
you're real intense.
179 of the MxU podcast was
Well, I was not implying fire. I was implying theft, which our operations guy has that thing so locked down. I think it would be pretty clear. Don't
Yeah.
you think?
Being a business owner, you read business books and they talk constantly about, slippage, and you just sort of write that in that you're going to lose things because employees steal them. But it's so like we have great people, and I've
Yeah.
never worried about that a day in owning ChurchGear that
Yeah.
our people would
That's good.
pocket stuff.
It did get brought up recently in a staff meeting. Like we were like, oh, there's some really expensive stuff that could fit in your hand.
Yeah.
And it was also, you get a $60,000 lens sitting on a shelf. If that drops,
Yeah.
there are certain things that we would love to have in a cage
By the
just
way,
to protect them.
I saw a post.
I was gonna bring this
I
up.
saw a post a couple days ago with you and Brian
All the marketing guys.
mishandling a bunch of gear. First of all, do you have any idea what a Lexicon 960L is?
Compressor?
It is.
I had a shot.
It's a Ferrari to an audio guy.
It is like if that doesn't have a barcode on it currently, and I could come in and steal something from your shop, that would probably be near the top of the list. It is a Lexicon effects unit that's about this big, and it sounds unbelievable. It was like the gold standard for reverb and delay effects in studios all over the world.
Yeah.
So first of all, what is it doing in a church? What did you pay for it when you got it from said church?
Yeah, tell us.
And what are you selling it for?
See, the church's barcode was also off. So
First of all, it's surprising how many churches have amazing studios,
Yeah.
and they have just incredible gear. And a lot of them, they're just mixing in the box with
Yeah.
all of this outboard gear sitting around them. So, I get it from their perspective. We're not really using this gear anymore, but we love it so much because it's so amazing. So we do get some of that really high-end studio stuff.
It's awesome.
I have no idea where we got it from or what we paid for it, unless I look through our inventory and figure it out. Because
Well, it's funny because most
track
people
it.
like me, I have an affinity for it because I have a long history of using it. But if I bought it from you, I have no idea what I would do with it.
yeah,
It's like, it's one of those things where it's like so much of what I need in terms of reverb and effects is available in the box. It would be like, okay, how would I hook it up in terms of signal flow and efficiency and all that? So not that you shouldn't buy it. If you need a 960, it's an awesome piece of gear, but it is a thing, right? It's like
Yeah.
you run into a lot of that with used gear where it's like, okay, it's a perfect fit for somebody, but not everybody is that somebody.
yeah. One of the funny things I like to talk about is when I'm talking to other guys that understand AVL and especially the church world, they will ask, "What's your best seller?" And when I tell them legitimately,
you should have them guess.
okay, you guys know what our
Your
best
best
seller.
seller? Oh man.
Think about common gear. We give us-
SM57.
That was really quick.
I mean, I guess I would guess X32, but
If we
if
got
that is true, that's a dumb idea.
blue Avioms or Avioms, however you say
Yeah.
it, that's
Really?
our best seller. And so a church that's running, Clang now and thinking, how in the world is a church doing the dark ages of blue Avioms? You think how many churches are just now discovering how great is our God? And so a lot of smaller churches they just enter technology at a slower pace than some other churches.
Yeah.
Saying they didn't know how great God was before.
Just the song,
The
Blake.
song.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you guys sell a lot of microphones? Because I would have thought like you guys,
We don't
any
get-
church closet is going to have microphones they're not using anymore.
Most churches won't sell us SM57s because they never go out of style.
Utility
use it.
mic, they'll
Yeah.
use it from a trumpet to a snare drum.
Yeah, and when we did that video, Jeff, they handed me a lens and someone told me it was 60 grand. So I mean, I was holding it like this and Toby's like, that's like $500.
It was a projector lens.
What's up with the lens y'all were washing in the sink?
Man, so many people were like, these guys got money. I was like, it's broke. Like we have a huge box. We don't tell people this, but like churches, we buy their gear and sometimes it doesn't work. And we don't go back and nickel and dime them. We have people that sometimes buy it and fix it. So there's this giant box of broken gear. And so we just pull from that for videos.
Kind of like when we did our Smash or Cash video a few years ago.
That was
And
fun.
We had so many people this is so wasteful. Blah blah blah. It's
was all broken.
Already broken.
It was already broken.
Sorry,
That
guys.
2448 was already broken.
Right.
24,
It was
Which
pretty.
could have been great for the live stream.
It was pretty fun taking the sledgehammer to that console,
Yeah.
though.
Oh,
I
man.
was shocked at how durable it was, though. Like
Yeah.
all the gear.
It was. It actually, in hitting it, it was like, oh, that kind of hurt me. Like the kickback from the desk itself. That was a nice strong metal frame.
I got the sense that you don't have human nemesis.
Nemesis.
You
Messiah?
have like equipment nemesis.
I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You love all people, but there's some gear out there
There's
that
some gear out there that
you
I
are broken up with. and
have yeah,
You were never, ever getting back
It
together.
was the X32 comment. You got it with the X32.
maybe so, yeah.
The number one used console in America in churches.
We brought it with us this week.
What about the compact? That's
okay.
different, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's to your point, there are a lot of churches who are not using the cutting edge of technology.
Yeah.
So I keep thinking that console is surely going to see its end of life at some point, and it just keeps on ticking.
Just keep going.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, there isn't quite. There will be soon, but they're just quite. There aren't many obvious replacements for it yet. There are a few, but there are not like a plethora in that kind of price range of console, and it just keeps getting cheaper and cheaper. I think Sweetwater's now selling it for like
$2,000.
somebody told me even less than $2,000 the other day. They had a sale on it,
Wow.
and I was just it was like $1,800, and I was like,
Yeah.
what console can give you that functionality for that price point?
It's a great youth room console.
It's a great. Most churches are using it in their main rooms.
Yeah.
You know, it's like and I can't necessarily fault them for that until we have a better solution. There are a few.
That's true, but I don't have to like it.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, they're all going to hell if they're using it. But
Oh my gosh, Blake.
we can cut that if that was too far. Maybe that
And
was
this
the
is
cut.
Blake every time. We can cut that. We can cut that.
Let's do a clap.
See, Blake's going to listen to this back, and he's like, I thought I was on this podcast. And we just cut you out of the whole thing.
And I would not blame you a bit.
Oh man.
Does gear have a soul with Blake Hodges?
That could be a killer monologue.
Yeah.
There's some good gear that feels like it creates soul. Not really, but you know what I mean. Soulful music.
There's soulful gear, but
Yeah.
I don't think gear has an eternal destination.
No. But will your pets go to heaven? That's the one I always ask.
Oh man.
Depends on the pet, right? Depends on the animal.
We're probably
I
bunny
mean,
trailing here.
Dogs are going to heaven. Cats are definitely not.
Cats are the spawn.
You
of
should have
Satan.
seen this guy's face when I told him about my tragic dog passing.
Hey,
And we don't need to
circle
get
of
into
life.
that, but I'm
No,
just
circle of
saying
life.
he was in tears almost. He was like, if my cat died, I would be
I just couldn't do
I
it.
would be more sad.
10 grand, couldn't do it.
So Blake, when your cat died, you had a funeral.
Yep.
And what was the
Here's
funeral?
what I did. I wore sweats in the middle of the summer to dig a hole in the backyard.
because you were going for a run.
Yes. As I played Coldplay, which
Fix
now I've ruined Fix You for my wife, and I just cried the whole time. All the tears I've ever cried for my whole family members that have all died, nothing compared to that cat. I didn't even really like that cat a lot. Spencer, I don't know how you did it.
Oh my god.
We can cut that.
We're definitely not
That's what
cutting
Blake
that.
says after every comment.
Yeah.
That's the only thing we're keeping of your
We could just
content.
do that on your podcast. We can cut that.
No, I have to do that on our podcast.
Yeah.
When we talk to people in real life, Toby's like, we can't cut that in real life. Shut up.
Yeah. It's because Sandstrom's sitting next to you. It's just that you're like, I don't know. This guy hates me.
I don't hate Blake.
You don't
I
understand.
just hate everything he stands for.
You don't understand. Sandstrom, Todd Elliott, Nick Kofol. I'm just trying to get their approval. You know, it's going to take me 100 years, but I'm trying.
Oh man.
That's funny.
Shout out Todd Elliott and Nick Kofal. All right, so we're talking about today, if we were to sum it up to a title, church goer or profiteer. You guys have this core value at ChurchGear, and I saw it a number of years ago, and first time we were in your old building, I believe. And it was while I was going to the
Can we
bathroom.
talk about your old warehouse, by
Yeah,
the way?
I was going to the bathroom. I
A
went to go
death
to the
trap.
bathroom. I went to go to the
murder barn.
bathroom, and there was consoles in the way. I had to like move a console to use the toilet.
Uh-huh.
I dropped that once.
And we still own that.
Yeah.
Or the old
And
Mackie.
it's full of our like extra gear. And one of our warehouse guys went over there the other day to pick up something and had to step around a snake.
Oh
That
my
was-
Our
gosh.
operations guy
alive.
got stung by a wasp the week before that.
Yep.
Yeah.
We call it the murder barn.
It was a pretty wild space.
Yeah.
I remember you guys, I mean, you had your workstations and there was like mini split here, go to the mini split, work
Yeah.
there, go down this way. Yeah.
At least it was warm.
It was warm.
Yeah, in the middle of summer.
Middle of summer, no AC.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, so I remember when I was in your guys' building for the first time, I saw a sign. This is before I really knew you guys well, but there was a sign on the wall that said, ChurchGear, we are church goers. And that was a core value. Am I getting it right? You're
Yeah.
church goers?
That's our number one core value.
And I that stuck with me for a long time. It was actually before we even had core values at MxU, and I was like, I really want to steal theirs. I'm not going to. But anyways, I was like really impressed by that. I'm curious to get your perspective. I'm assuming you came up with that, Toby.
Yeah.
Even though I know you're the core values guy, Blake.
We spent a year and a
uh,
half on core values, so
Yeah.
I'm having flashbacks now.
Anyways, what convictions do you carry that led to that? Why? When did that become a thing? If it was day one, I'm curious to know where it flows from.
Yeah. There's not a day in my life I can't remember being in church. I think there were 3 weeks between going through a horrific firing at a church where I said, I'm done with church, before my wife and Jesus said, no, you're not. And so 3 weeks later, I was back and like, I've never been away since. It's just in my DNA who I am. And also I've realized more and more and more, it's churches are about the relationship. In order to trust you to do business with you, it's about building a relationship. And so it's, for me, in my opinion, it's really hard to build a relationship with a church that's going to trust you if you don't go to church, if that's not part of who you are. And so I said, that's going to be very much a part of who we are as a company. Now, we do live in America and it is a business. So it's not like I'm checking people's Sunday morning activities to make sure they're going to church.
Yeah.
Like I can't make my employees go to church, but I can also, when interviewing people that want to work at ChurchGear, I say, would you fit in with a culture where we believe that going to church should be a priority? And so that's kind of how we approach it.
Yeah.
yeah, that's good because you're not technically a Christian company. You can't force people into that. You can't discriminate on the basis of that. But it is important. And it's not the other thing, though, the other side of the coin is that it's not a marketing tactic or a gimmick.
Yeah.
It's like it has to be authentic, right? Like we believe that, we're serving churches to help them make their weekends better so that they can experience growth and vitality and growth in their relationship with Jesus, as well as growth as a church. And so we can't say we believe that and that we're for that if we're not personally involved in a church ourselves. And it's just the two have to go hand in hand. It's like I can't be authentic about our mission and then just ignore it in my personal life.
And we've heard so many stories just on the back end of other churches that's not in their DNA. I'm not saying they're trying to take advantage of churches, but that's just not who they are. And then, the sense, the feeling, the stories you hear later on eventually about that company is kind of like, I just didn't quite know how I felt about them. It felt disingenuous. It didn't feel like us. And
Yeah.
And I think Profiteer it's a bit of a
It's a marketing word.
It's
100%.
It's a title. It's like, we're going to get a few people listen to this because we use the word profiteer. But we're not saying that manufacturers are inherently evil.
Yeah.
It's like there are people who manufacture consoles and PA systems and switchers and lights that have a house of worship focus in some aspect of their business. And that doesn't mean that if they don't go to church, then that makes their gear evil. It's not that. It's just, if you claim to care about serving the church, then how invested are you in the church?
Yeah.
And I think that's the distinction.
And to be very clear, this sounds weird to say, but we profit off of churches. That's our business model.
Right.
And if we didn't do that, we wouldn't be able to help churches. That's the only way to stay in business is to turn a profit.
Yeah.
And we've had those discussions internally. Are we a business or a ministry? Well, we're a business that helps ministries.
Yeah. I was curious because I was like, what's the actual definition of profiteer? Because it is a bit of a dramatic word. It says make or seek to make an excessive or unfair profit, especially illegally or in a black market.
Not black magic.
Yeah, not black magic,
Black
but
market.
It's interesting. You guys,
So
there's
it's all about motivation.
yeah, it's about motivation, right? And you guys have church literally in your name.
Yeah.
Right. You guys wake up every day, like us. We don't have church in our name, but we are similar in that we wake up every day going, how can we serve the church? How can we ultimately, yes, businesses have a product and they market that product ultimately to serve a church. In our case, right? Yeah. Other businesses, it might be other verticals, marketplaces, such and so on. So all that to say, I think what we're talking about specifically here is when you exclusively work with the church, right? And maybe, somebody could buy your gear who is outside of the church and you might not know, but that's not what you're aiming to do. When you're exclusively serving the church, there are kind of two ways I've seen it done. It can be from this place, genuine love and desire to help the church. And the only way you would, I believe, really develop that is by going to church, being a part of a local church or having experience in a local church. And I've also seen it very real in a way of where church is a vertical for a business. It's a market segment. It's a market segment. And we saw this very real during COVID. When COVID happened, I can't tell you how many people wanted to be our best friend during COVID because they were like, you guys are in with the church community. So how can we work together? Because our touring division's down. We don't make any money there.
Yeah.
And we really can't make money anywhere other than off the church.
Well, and a lot of manufacturers realized for the first time that the church was a viable market in the first place. Yeah. Like they weren't even ever focusing on the church. And then all of a sudden it was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
There are thousands of customers potentially that we've never interacted with. Yeah. So let's pour gas on that.
Yeah. And like we talk about manufacturers, we talk about, a lot of churches out there, they don't even know what an integrator is. An integrator is somebody who ultimately that's the person you might be buying the gear from or is installing the gear in your church, right? You guys aren't an integration firm, right? No. But you guys sell gear as a third party, you're not a manufacturer, you're selling used gear, right? So it's kind of a niche thing that you guys are in. But we find this often, and this is, I think this conversation can be helpful for some churches out there who are trying to decide, who can I trust? Who can I work with? Because here at MxU, we don't sell gear. People often reach out going like, what should we buy and who do we buy it from? And we're like, well, we just don't do that. We can kind of get you in touch with some people who are trustworthy. But man, a lot of churches are wanting to know, do I go to Sweetwater? Oftentimes they might go to Sweetwater. They might just buy something online. Or so-and-so is trying to sell me. We're building a new building. Can I trust them to have our church's best interest? Do we actually need that piece of gear? Do we actually need that PA they're saying we need? And there's that, I don't know. And I think that's the question, and that's the discussion we're having here today is how can they walk through that process and ask the right questions to make sure they're dealing with somebody who speaks the same language, who ultimately has their best interest in mind, and not the interest of excessive profit. Yeah. Because I will say the church, for all you out there, if you weren't aware, if you're a business serving the church, it can be kind of a landmine. There are a lot of churches in America. And if you have the goal of making excessive profit, the church, a nonprofit organization, is a really, really easy sector to go after at times because often uneducated on technology, volunteer ran, and they have a weekly need for technology. And they oftentimes don't have an advocate. So they're just going, oh, it's so-and-so down the street, it's an IT professional, and he's our most knowledgeable person in audio, video, lighting here. And that's a beautiful thing. But then when it comes time to spend $100,000 on a brand new system and your church has been saving up for years, that is a really vulnerable place to be in. Yeah.
And it's, transparency is really important in these situations. We all hear the horror stories of like healthcare bills that we get. Mm-hmm. And then if you actually get the itemized list, you see, I paid, $250 for a Band-Aid, Blake? And so we know that like sometimes companies will sell them a bill of goods and say it's $2 million. Well, what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
And so is there actual transparency on what you're getting for your money? And then, like you said, do you have an advocate, somebody that understands this stuff that's going to give you
Yeah.
good advice?
Yeah, I heard a story the other day from a church about a church that was pursuing a project, and they basically got 3 bids and went for the lowest price.
Yeah.
And didn't realize that the bid did not include labor.
Mm.
And
How
so,
convenient.
And so their project ended up with a huge check to write at the end
Yeah.
because they weren't aware. They were like, yeah, this is the gear.
Yeah.
But to install it is going to be an extra how many tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And so they just, there's an awareness, there's a transparency, like you said, and there's a real danger of being taken advantage of.
Yeah.
Jeff, you've done a ton of touring in your lifetime. You oftentimes would go into churches and see new churches every week, your days of touring. Would you see this often? Would you walk into a church and be like, why did they buy that?
Yeah, sometimes. There was, I can think of several churches where they had a brand new console with a 15-year-old PA. And it was like, the problem with your experience was not the capability of your console.
Mm-hmm.
It was that you have amps that aren't fully functioning. You've got a deployment of a PA that is just really bad. You've got acoustics that were never attended to. And so you have weird reflections and weird things. You've got a projector on the house left side that's almost to the point of failure. It's so dim compared to this one. It's like things like that would just, it's like, isn't anybody paying attention?
Yeah.
And if you had somebody who you could trust to integrate these things properly, it's like, man, maybe the bill of, or the desire, sometimes it would be like the desire of the operator to have this new console and their inability to sort of set that preference aside to go, hey, what's best for the whole experience here?
Yeah.
Because I could fall in love with this console and think, man, we're going to spend $75,000 on this piece of gear at the expense of so many other things. It's like to have a trusted partner that could go, hey, if this is about serving your local ministry, let's look at these other things as well. Let's maybe set aside our preference on this desk and pay attention to what's happening on the screen. Pay attention to the acoustics. Pay attention to, whatever else we need to talk about, because, this is just out of whack with how we're going to use, particularly if we're using tithes and offerings money. It's a really dangerous thing. I think people need to take that part of it more seriously. That you're dealing with funds that are coming from people who are really trying to be obedient in their faith in terms of what they contribute to the ministry. And so all the more reason that we need to have partners in the process that will take that seriously as well.
And I think it's something I encourage churches all the time is that there is likely an advocate down the street at the megachurch, that their TD probably knows a whole lot about whether you should buy that console or whether it's something else in your room. And if you just build a relationship with that person and ask those questions, you get a lot of helpful tips.
And it's not because I love that. And I say that often to churches as well. And the heart behind that is not, because I think sometimes small churches don't want to look at the big church because they're like, we're not like them. And it's not to be, well, you got to be big just like them. It's they have the resource to have a professional on staff who is aligned with their vision and mission. And they're a part of the greater body of Christ. And I think there's something to that, and having those, like you're saying, those connections, those people who you can bounce ideas off. And reach out to, this is why there's great companies like Philo. I would say this is what we do at MxU. I see you guys do this at ChurchGear. Companies who care and will answer your questions regardless if you're going to buy anything.
Yeah.
Who will actually try to get you in touch with the right person, the right people to make these decisions. And I think if I could be so honest, what's challenging for me is there are actually a lot, again, if you're in the church, you're not aware of this, there are a lot of companies who exclusively serve the church. And that, I want to get really practical here so that churches can walk away from this and actually feel like, okay, this is how I can handle this in the future and think about some things differently. But, oftentimes that's a selling point for a company. Hey, we exclusively serve the church, so that's why you should work with us. Frankly, that's not really good enough anymore. And what are in my mind, and I'd be happy to be wrong if any of you guys have pushback, but in my mind, that's not good enough anymore because it's just become a new H1 for a marketing website. It is like, we serve churches. And I've talked to companies who say they serve churches, but they are not a part of the local church. And they don't believe in being a part of the local church. For me personally, that's disappointing. But how could what are some questions a church could ask of a company that they're maybe entering into somewhat of a business relationship with or a purchasing relationship? What are some practical questions they can ask of them to sift through? Do they have our best interest in mind?
Yeah. And I think, something to make sure is, first of all, you don't get distracted by the flash. There's a lot of whining and dining that happens to try and win churches to go with a company. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if that's your reason, because they took you to a really nice dinner, treated you great, and you signed a $2 million contract, that is a very poor use of your people's generously donated funds to your church. Yeah. I think the number one thing is just check references. Call other churches that have worked with them. And if you don't, you are being a terrible steward of your church's resources.
And that's any project.
Yeah.
That could be repaving the parking lot. That could be, doing something with facilities outside of your worship center, like just as a general best practice for business. I think that's great.
And it doesn't have to be a church. Like, call somebody else who's worked with them and say, how'd it go?
If it's a general contractor, if it's one of the subs that is handling the trades, if it's, anybody should be, well referenced and well represented. Another thing I would say is, and this, I wish this happened more. I would like for a church to see if their prospective vendor could actually restate back to them what their vision is.
Yeah.
In other words, have you had a conversation about vision? Have you had a conversation about, here's what we're about in our ministry, and we want somebody who can help us kind of see this through.
Yeah.
And if they can't repeat back to you what you want to do with this space or this ministry or this building or whatever, either they're not paying attention or you haven't done a good job communicating in the first place.
Yeah.
It's not just, hey, we want a brand new building that does these things, but why? And I think if you can have a partner that understands your why, it's going to make the whole process a lot smoother and maybe, be able to steward the funds even better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is personal and not easy. I recognize this isn't easy. I've seen this firsthand. I mean, I'll tell a very short story. We've worked with many businesses over the years at MxU. There's a business that we used heavily for a while, and I remember having conversations one day with this business as they were in our space, and I'm talking about, I went to church yesterday. This is a business that proclaimed to exclusively serve the church, and that was their mission. And they all kind of snapped their heads at me, and they're like, "You go to church? Like, you do that?" And they were shocked by that. They were like, "Oh, we don't go to church." And there was one guy who was like, "I'm the only one in our company that goes to church, that is a part of a local church." And that day was like really formative for me because it helped me realize, I don't think I've critically looked at this enough and been, I think I've maybe just too gullible or believable. If somebody says, "Oh, we want to help the church," then, oh, they must want to help the church. And so I think if I could add to that list of questions, I would say if these people, I'm not one of those that's like, you can only work with Christians. I mean, if I need surgery tomorrow and the best doctor to do that surgery is not a Christian, I'm probably going to pick that doctor, right? So I'm not saying you should only work with Christians who go to church. That's not what I'm saying here. But if you're working with a company who has sold you their services because they exclusively work with churches, I would challenge you to ask them, what church do you go to?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, just ask them about faith. Like, talk to them. Like, you should just ask them, like, yeah,
Cool.
what church do you go to?
Yeah.
Like, how's your small group going? Like, you can't really fake that.
You'd be surprised, but yes, absolutely, right? Like, ask them what church to go to. Hey, what's happening in your faith community back home? And I think you're going to find out pretty quickly if these people are for the church or if they might be interested in profiting off the church.
Yeah.
And sadly, that's a very real thing. And if you're out there and you're like, that can't be, I hate to break it to you.
We can tell you some stories.
But that's not to say that there's anything wrong with making a profit.
Absolutely
And that's
not.
the distinction. It's like they're running a business. That's fine. There's going to be profit involved.
make a profit to
Otherwise,
have
they
that
can't
business.
feed their children. It's
Yeah.
that's
Back to the
We're gonna set that
definition of
aside, yeah.
unfair profit or, dare I say, predatory
Yeah.
in the sense of, I see this. I mean, we talked about this earlier. It feels that way sometimes in health, in the kind of health system, right? Like my wife and I had a baby recently, and our third, and we got the bill, and it was like, well, if it's the insurance company paying, it's this price, but if it's you paying, it's this price, and so on and so forth, and that can feel a little bit predatory, right? Of what, this doesn't seem genuine, and I think that's what we're speaking to, right? There's nothing wrong with profit, but there is something wrong with looking for a vulnerability to profit off of.
And that can also be a little bit of a dangerous perspective for the churches. We occasionally come across churches that are offended that we're going to make a profit off of our business. And that's just ignorance. Like, you can't work with a company that doesn't make a profit because the company wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
And so to find that balance of, okay, who is for the church, who buys into my mission, understands the why, but you have to understand, yes, all these people have to feed their children too.
Yeah.
So it's going to cost money.
Yeah.
Well, let's see, that's the big distinction, is that if you're a business, but you are for the church, you can't sleep at night knowingly ripping off your brother in Christ. Like, you just can't. You might be a business and you run for a profit, but you have a list of options on every decision. And there's decisions that you're going to pick the better option when you also go to church.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's definitely a tricky conversation to navigate, and it all comes back to relationship and just getting to know. It's easy to speak about these things broadly, and it can be tempting to do that on a podcast such in this format, but it really comes back to pursue relationship with the people that you are depending on to help you steward hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. Develop a relationship, because I think to ignorantly just say, it must be a professional and we got to move on quickly, I got a meeting, might not be the wisest approach.
Yeah, that's good.
And feel free to disagree. One of the last question I'd throw in there is just like, hey, ask them if something breaks 6 months later, how's that going to go? Like, are they going to help you? Can I get a replacement piece? Like, I'd ask that to their references, most likely. Talk to someone that worked with them 2 years ago. Just see how that's going to go afterwards.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you guys for being here for this conversation and all the other conversations that have happened this week that aren't on the podcast.
Are the mics on? We never said we were starting.
Oh, we're always recording.
I see.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it's great to hang out with you guys. And just as a reminder, the Black Magic courses drop tomorrow. Be looking out for an email. If you are an MxU subscriber, you'll have access to it automatically. If you're not an MxU subscriber, then go to getmxu.com and sign up today, because this is content and other content coming that you are not going to want to miss. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.